Thanks for hopping on today. With September being back to school season, we thought we'd teach everyone something. Check out our background. Shout out to our marketing partner, Gravity Marketing, for making these for us. But today we're going to learn about backup and disaster recovery. It's a topic that uh, generally comes second fiddle to things like cybersecurity and AI, but it still gets asked about quite a bit. And we surveyed a lot of our customer base, and this is something that was asked to be covered. So, what we're going to do is dive in and see how organizations handle incidents with backup. Today, our speakers are going to be myself. I'm Scott Nielsen, Director of Business Development here at Ontech Systems. And I know some of you have seen me around the area. It's part of my job to be out and about. Also with me is one of our technical account managers, Dan Deneen. Dan has quite the tenure on tech, starting out on the engineering side and then moving over into account management to help our client base with their overall technology strategy.
Hello, everyone.
The agenda for today is going to cover these following bullet points. We're going to cover backup defined, why it's more than just storage. Backup should be more than just an afterthought. We're going to examine the cost of doing nothing. Then from there, we're going to dive into the optimal backup strategy, which is referred to as the 3-2-1 backup strategy. Then we'll explore differences between on-prem backup and cloud backup. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A, but please feel free to throw your questions in the chat as we go. So I'm going to go into some geek speak here, but when we look at technology, there are a few standards that technology professionals operate by as guidelines, which is what is meant by being a security control. So in terms of security controls, you have, and I'm going to throw out some three-letter acronyms. You have CIS, which stands for Critical Security Controls. You have NIST, NIST, that stands for the National Institute of Security Standards and Technology. And then you also have the Cloud Security Alliance controls. Each standard specifies backup as one of the checkboxes to make sure you're doing the right things. Consistency across the board denotes backup as its own form of security. If hackers encrypt your data, backup allows you to keep moving. So examining this in part one of ransomware, many people think of backup as just simply saving files, when really it's how your business keeps going in terms of an incident. Continuing with backup being a security control, part two, I'm sorry to say the top cost of data loss. When people say it's not you, it's me, well, it's actually all of us. Sadly, we're all the problem. Human error leads to the largest amount of business continuity issues when it comes to technology. I'm even going to read you a snippet from Clause 6B of Microsoft's Terms of Service. And the clause states, we strive to keep the services up and running. However, all online services suffer occasional disruptions and outages. Microsoft is not liable for any disruption or loss you may suffer as a result. In the event of an outage, you may not be able to retrieve your content data that you've stored, and we recommend that you regularly back up your content data on services that you store using a third-party app or service. And this is going to be included in the Microsoft Terms of Service agreement. So where many people think backup is simply saving files, It's going to be that core security measure that protects against the accidental deletions, or, really what we do in our day-to-day that causes data loss. Sorry. Going into part 3, hardware failures. So disk failures, server crashes, backups, they still keep you guys running. One thing to keep in mind is that hardware gets old, and having a backup strategy combats aging systems where drives tend to fail within 3 years. The other thing to keep in mind is environmental damage. I know we had some flooding not too long ago, about 3-4 weeks ago. If you were to have a server in your place of business's basement and that basement were to flood, the good rule of thumb would be to have the server backed up, because once that physical server down there fails, what's going to keep it up and running? The backup is. With more organizations moving to the cloud, there isn't as much thought about backing up the physical hardware, but it's still something to think about in your day-to-day to keep your business running. Going into part 4, and I touched on this a little bit ago, but natural disasters, fires, floods, theft, they can just wipe out local systems, and off-the-site backup mitigates this risk. I want to use the example of in 2021, and I'm going to pick on Texas here because Texas isn't as resilient as the good folks in Wisconsin. They had a major snowstorm. Wasn't really that bad. It's just Texas is not equipped to handle cold weather. And this snowstorm led to disruptions in the state's supply chain for a level of cold that would be just another day here in the Midwest. However, one company, the company was called DataBank. They kept their 8 data centers up and running by using prearranged power backups, and they were unaffected by those supply chain issues. So really, we think about, hackers, we think about people, but we rarely ever think about the environment or even accidents, right? Like a piece of hardware falls off a high shelf and breaks. Is that piece of hardware essential to keeping your business running? And now I want to turn it over to Dan to cover business continuity and risk management.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, everyone. I see some names I recognize and some I don't, but my name's Dan. Scott gave me a little intro, so if you have any questions, like he had said, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. But wanted to get a little bit into business continuity and risk management. I'll give you a little bit of a background of what the business continuity is referring to, and it's the strategic and operational framework that it would ensure your business's critical infrastructure and functions can continue to occur during a disruption. It's not just about a backup or a recovery. It's about maintaining those daily operations, protecting your inventory, your assets, minimizing downtime, and that's really to try to safeguard revenue and your reputation. Risk management, on the other hand, is the process of identifying and assessing and mitigating risks that could impact your business's daily objectives. So it's more of a systematic approach to help you understand what the potential threats are and evaluating those threats and those threats could have on your business, and then implementing controls to reduce your exposure to such. these two pieces, business continuity and risk management, kind of form the backbone of your business's resilience against, threats and issues that way. So they enable you to anticipate challenges and then respond effectively and recover quickly, turning a potential crisis into opportunities for growth and improvement. So it like it says in the text in the slide, your backup would act as an insurance. You hope you never need it, but when disaster strikes, we rely on it, right? It's a difference between a major disruption and a catastrophic loss. Next, we kind of talk about why backups are important. And there's a couple main bullet points that why really they're important. So minimizing downtime, that's a pretty important one, right? Day-to-day business, we want to be up and running always. So backups help ensure that our critical data and our systems can be restored quickly after a disruption. That could be due to hardware failure, cyber attack, human error, any of those ways. By implementing automated and frequent backups, we can reduce that risk of data loss. We also try to build in redundant systems with on-site storage, off-site cloud backups, and we ensure availability to those backup locations, even if a primary system were to fail. Disaster recovery plans, backup tests, all of those features can help you test and restore within a specific period of time. If you as a business, have never sat and talked about a couple of acronyms, RTO, RPO, recovery time objective and recovery point objective, please let us know, and we can definitely help you go through those plans, because that is what really will help you minimize your downtime. A lot of industries also have, I'm still on that, I didn't go to the next slide yet, Scott. A lot of companies too have compliancy and regulations that require them to have certain data protection, may require them to have certain retention and also recovery capabilities. So a robust backup strategy can really help you meet those regulatory requirements. That could be HIPAA, GDPR, auditing that may have to happen, and integrity, data integrity. So a good strategy will help you stay compliant and avoid penalties and potential legal exposure by being prepared and accountable in those. And then lastly, customer trust is a big one. Customers expect their data to be safe and accessible. A reliable backup system helps to maintain that trust. With a reliable backup, you're protecting sensitive information from loss or breach. You're ensuring that you're able to service your customers, even if there were to be unexpected downtime. And you're demonstrating responsibility and transparency in handling incidences, which reassures your customers and strengthens your business or brand reputation. So cost of doing nothing, part one, financial loss from downtime. So downtime is more than just an inconvenience. It's a direct hit to the business's bottom line. Depending on your business size and industry, the cost can be pretty substantial. So I pulled a couple statistics that I thought were pretty relative in this. So whether your business falls into a large enterprise or a medium-sized business or even a small business, here's some statistics that I thought were pretty surprising. So large enterprises lose up to $1.4 million per hour. Sectors like finance, healthcare can exceed $5 million per hour in downtime. Your average medium-sized business, which is 90% of businesses that are reporting downtime, their costs can exceed up to $300,000 per hour. And small businesses average between $400 to $1,400 per minute of downtime, and the cumulative impact can reach up to $1 million annually. So these figures they include lost productivity, missed sales, recovery costs, reputation damage, all of that stuff into one. So it really kind of turns and means that backup is not optional, right? Failing to implement a robust backup and continue to strategize exposes your business to massive financial loss, regulatory penalties, unsatisfied or upset customers, can even be business failure. So we like to really take a proactive approach to backups and making sure that you have regular backups in place, disaster recovery planning, employee training. Those items can really help turn a potential catastrophe into something that's more manageable and minimize that interruption.
Dan, do you think this man on the picture is so upset because he didn't back up his data?
I think he's trying to get in and probably steal someone's data.
Yeah.
So, cyber attack fallout is a big one that we hear about. So, cyber attacks can also cause major disruptions and inconveniences to the business. Again, affecting wallet and trust. Right, those are kind of the big things. Are the dollars you lose and the client trust that you could potentially lose. So, globally, the average cost of a data breach, an average, is $4.4 million, with US breaches averaging $10 million due to fines and just ongoing detection costs and remediation. Ransomware attacks average costs in 2025 were 5 to 6 million. That included ransomware payments. So in some of these cyber attacks, if you don't have a robust backup, you're at the mercy of the cyber attackers that are holding your data, and your only option would be to pay their ransom. And there's no guarantee that you ever will get your data back fully if you pay that ransomware. So that's a risk that you're taking there. I have a couple of real world examples that I thought were interesting. So CDK Global had to pay $25 million in ransom after double attack disrupted their 15,000 car dealerships. Another real world example was Change Healthcare had to pay $22 million after cyber attack exfiltrated 6 terabytes of sensitive data. So without the proper backup strategy, a ransomware attack can really cripple your company. So again, it's another reason why your backup resilience is so important. If your business, like we talked about in some of those acronyms, have any legal or compliance requirements, HIPAA, FINRA, SOX, there's a ton of acronyms out there. Certain industries can have very strict requirements when it comes to being compliant and protecting your data and your backups. If your business has any specific requirements or you're unsure what you need to follow, please let us know. We have a very good security team here. We can engage them and discuss this with you and make sure that what your business's requirements are, you're matching up with what those requirements are as it pertains to backup and protecting your data. There are a couple real world examples where, again, I think it's always good to look at what's happened to other people. It's kind of like a scare tactic, which I never like to use, but it is pretty scary to see what some businesses have had to go through because they haven't protected their data. But everyone's familiar with Meta, but Meta had to pay $1.4 billion for unlawful biometric data capture under Texas's, they call it the CUBI Act. Another big company, LinkedIn was fined $336 million for breaching third-party data without consent. Uber was fined $324 million for storing their driver data in the United States without safeguards on their backups. So there's a lot of big name companies that have all the money in the world that should be going through, standard practices for safeguarding data, and even they fall susceptible to this stuff. So again, if you don't know where you fall and what requirements you have, let us know so that we can help you with, bringing that up and reviewing it all in detail. So one of the big topics is the 3-2-1 backup strategy, and why it's important. So 3-2-1 stands for 3 copies of your data, 2 different storage medias, and 1 offsite copy. So what that means is we want to maintain at least 3 total copies of your data, 1 primary and 2 backups, at a minimum. So that reduces the risk of losing data due to corruption or accidental deletion. We want to leverage 2 different storage medias. So we want to store the backups in 2 different types of media, whether that's an external hard drive, a NAS, which is a network attached storage device, cloud storage, tape drives. I mean, that's an older technology, but some places still do leverage tape drives. But what that helps do is protect against failure of a single medium. So if your external hard drive dies, we still have a NAS that has the data on it. And then offsite copy is a big one. So we want to keep 1 backup offsite, either in the cloud or at a remote physical location. Let's say your business has multiple sites, we can replicate backups from one NAS to the other. But this helps ensure data is safe from a local disaster like a fire or a flood or theft. It's a pretty simple and cost-effective strategy, and it's very reliable. So it's kind of the cornerstone of the business's continuity planning is the 3-2-1 backup strategy. Talk a little bit about some of the different on-prem versus cloud solutions. There's a ton of different solutions out there. We support a lot of different solutions here at Ontech, but I'll kind of go over what they are a little bit if you're not familiar. Hopefully this will help. But an on-site backup solution is refers to any storing of copies of your critical data backup at the same location as the primary system. So if you have a business that has a server on site, we're backing that server up again to whether it's a USB drive or a NAS, to the same location. So we kind of have a dedicated backup infrastructure that's a lot of times in the same room as the servers. There's a couple really nice features about that and those would be fast recovery. So having the backup right there and accessible allows us for quick access, quick restoration of data, in case there's any accidental deletion, hardware failure, or software issues. It also gives us full control over those backups. So we have full control of where the backups are stored, the hardware it's on, the security, the access, full control over that. And a lot of times they're very cost effective. So they're less expensive than cloud solutions or large volume data storage. And that's really due to the one-time hardware cost. There are some limitations to that, and a major one would be vulnerabilities due to like a local disaster. We had the flooding here. What was that, about a month ago, where we had the flooding? That's a big risk. Theft, ransomware can compromise that, again, which is where we want to come to that 3-2-1, where we have it local and cloud. But there's risks involved with storing your data backup on-premise in the same location as your main running solution. There's also maintenance involved, right? So hardware needs regular monitoring, updates, replacement when it gets aged. So there are some limitations to having just an on-prem backup only. Cloud backup solutions have become very popular. So a cloud backup solution involves storing copies of your data on remote servers or services managed by a third-party provider. And those are accessible either through a VPN or the internet, direct connection to that. Offsite storage, the data isn't stored in your physical location. It's protected from a local disaster. And it separates itself from your local infrastructure. They're usually excuse me, they're usually very scalable. So say you add a bunch of infrastructure, or you do a business, you purchase a business and you bring their data into your company, and you need to, increase your storage quickly. That's very easy to do, very scalable. You can adjust data sizes and retentions without having to buy new hardware, right? Automation is another big one. So backups can be scheduled continuous, reducing human error, ensuring consistency there, and accessibility. Data can be restored from anywhere with an internet connection. So if your business were to have a fire and you had to move to a temporary business, you can use the internet then to restore your data to that new location without any problems. So it supports remote work and disaster recovery too. It also, some other benefits are enhanced security. So the providers a lot of times will offer encryption, access controls, certain compliancy requirements with data protection regulations within their monthly fee. So that helps with that. The continuity as well enables rapid recovery from cyber attacks, hardware failures. There are some limitations of cloud backup solutions, and a big one is going to be internet dependency, right? So with a cloud solution, you are dependent on that internet connection from your business to be able to back up and restore. Another limitation is ongoing costs. So cloud services have monthly recurring costs, usually subscription-based pricing. If you have a lot of data, these can be expensive, especially as your business grows, or if you have premium features, say you needed advanced security, things like that. Data recovery. Restoring large data sets from the cloud can be slower too, especially if your internet bandwidth isn't the best, right? So that can be a problem. And then you have a little bit more or less control. Your control is limited, right? You're paying a service to host and take the risk and store your data securely. So your control is a little bit limited on that front.
Thanks, Dan.
No worries.
Yeah. So, a couple things to think about in terms of choosing the right backup strategy for your industry. You're going to want to think about what sector are you in. So, just industry specific risk profiles. So, each industry faces unique threats, right? Like healthcare must comply with HIPAA, finance usually needs to comply with FINRA. Government, they face constant risk from ransomware, wildfires, floods. Um, Retail actually is one that people don't normally think about, but retail needs frequent backups of inventory and sales data to avoid revenue loss. But one of the things that a leadership team should do is assess the most common disaster risks and where they are, as well as cybersecurity risks. The other thing that you're going to want to take a look at are technical and operational factors, as well as backup method selection. So having a complete copy of all data is ideal, especially for initial setups or periodic restorations. The other thing that we're going to want to think about is incremental backup. So saving changes since the last backup. You're going to want to make sure that that backup is continually doing its thing. And that's one of the things that, a good IT partner does is part of maintenance. We can verify that the backup is continually doing its job. I compare it to buying a set of dumbbells and having them just sit in your living room, not using them, right? Like the dumbbells aren't going to be effective at growing muscle if you don't use them, right? Just like the backup probably isn't going to be effective unless you have someone taking a look at it, verifying that it's actually saving your data. The other thing you're going to want to think about is uptime requirements. So, how long can you stay up? How much can you afford to lose if you are in an incident? and how fast you need that data recovered. And then the other thing is just developing a backup policy for your business, defining expectations in a formal backup and recovery plan, and just assigning clear roles to who is going to be manning that. I know sometimes, we get very caught up in security and we get very caught up in talking about AI, but this is where backup is just as important. You need to define disaster recovery policies for your organization and define who's going to be taking point on those. And then the whole org has to buy in. It's a collective effort. And then the next thing is just ensuring that your backup strategy can scale with data growth and new systems. The crazy thing about technology is it changes overnight. It definitely evolves faster than people do. So just making sure that, you have an adaptable backup strategy that can scale with that data growth and those new systems. And then just make sure that you test and you validate it. Perform regular restores, make sure it's still active and doing its job. And that'll give you some peace of mind where if you do like a mock restore every once in a while, um, that's gonna let you sleep at night a little better knowing, yes, this backup is doing its job. So, and thanks for hopping on. Bye.